Welcome to The Best Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Bradley H. Werrell, and we're here to explore options and potentials to help us grow as individuals and as a community with one another in these difficult times and challenging times. We're exploring all manner of potentials related to the human experience, physical, psychological, medical, spiritual. It's a wonderful opportunity that we now experience in this critical phase of our human evolution. And I welcome you to join us in our podcast, become more aware, and identify with people who are helpful and supportive of you in your efforts as a human being on this planet and elsewhere too. We're going to be meeting people who are doing things that are widely variant from what is so-called normal within our society, in the creative space, within the social space. Our common purpose, seeking to generate positive potentials to improve the lives of everyone in our sphere of influence, and to expand that sphere of influence so that we may positively influence others that are not yet engaged directly with us. That's the goal here. We will learn more about each other as we go. I wish you the very best. Thank you very much for tuning in. Welcome to another episode of the Best Medicine Podcast. I'm Bradley Werrell, and today I have with me Mark Jeftovic. Tried real hard, Jeftovic.
Yeah, pretty close. You got it actually on the second try.
EasyDNS.com is his business, and he also has a blog called The Bomb Thrower, and he's out of Toronto, Canada. I appreciate you being with me today, and we'll see what we have some discussions. If you would like to introduce yourself further to the audience, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Mark Jeftovic here. Like Bradley said, I run a company called EasyDNS out of Toronto. We've been a domain registrar and web host since 1998. We're 6 months older than Google. So we've been around a while, and we have a focus on, not a focus, but we're one of the, I think, one of the companies that really tries to stand in the corner of our customers with matters like deplatforming and cancel culture and things like that. And that's sort of what we have a reputation for, but we have clients of all kinds: government, big industry, entertainers, bloggers, the whole gamut.
I'd say with that sort of interest, your business must be increasing as the time progresses.
Yeah, it's we're getting more and more interest, especially oddly enough from Americans, American people, American content creators, because cancel culture is so much more virulent there. And just generally, before the whole cancel culture thing took off, there was also this awareness of just everything being under surveillance, the whole NSA. Everything being vacuumed up. I mean, Canada is one of the Five Eyes countries as well, but there was still people, there was two things. There was American companies that wanted to just get out of what they called the NSA zone. And then there were Canadian companies that wanted to repatriate back into Canada and say, you know, we have infrastructure in the States, but we think it's a better idea to bring it back home.
It's very interesting. So I've had multiple conversations with people regarding this transitional state that we find ourselves in. And it's like the transition between sort of analog systems for processing information to digital systems of processing information. And I think that's a reasonable way to look at it.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we were talking before you started rolling tape about the podcast that I do with Jesse and Charles, Axis of Easy, and how the concept we capture it with is we're living through one of those ages of transition. This is similar to 500 years ago when the locus of power was the church, and then that moved into the nation state, and now we're moving from what we call the nation state into what we call the network state. Now, we didn't invent that term, but I've been noticing that term is coming at me from numerous different podcasts and essays and that sort of thing. And so that's the new configuration of power. And it's still up for grabs what that's going to be. It could be something decentralized, being powered by things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and DeFi. And Charles has this conceptual idea for something he calls community labor integrated money economy. I got it right, CLIME. So those are examples of possibly decentralized network states, or it could be something like Facebook or Google, and that might be a little bit of come meet the new boss, a lot like the old boss.
No, that's Charles Hugh Smith for anybody who I believe who's paying attention, because he has his own blog, which I find very interesting as well.
Yeah, he's of2minds.com.
Wonderful.
And Jesse Hirsch, who's the other co-host, is metaviews.ca.
Very good. And so you said it was community labor income economy?
Community labor integrated money economy. So Charles's idea is that rather than money being created by the Fed from a central bank that benefits the people who are closest to the monetary spigot, he thinks that there's a system that can be created where money gets created out of actual useful and required labor that's done within a community. So somebody needs some kind of work done on their yard or their car or tutoring for their kids, and he has the whole system worked out, and he talks about it in his books where it you put out almost a little RFP, like a mini tender, and you get, you see this on multi-sided platforms already, and somebody does the work, and when the work is verified, then the CLIME tokens or whatever are created, and the person gets paid with it. It's almost, I mean, we talked about this when we first started kicking it around. I said, Charles, this is a little scary. Isn't this like modern monetary theory? Because we're both very wary of that. And he's like, I guess it is, except what we realized is that the directionality is the opposite. With a system like CLIME, the gauge of the economy happens right at the level where the economic transactions are happening and the money gets created as those transactions take place. Whereas from MMT, modern monetary theory, you've got a bunch of experts sitting around a whiteboard saying, we think the economy needs this much this year, and then they just start, and there's no real market signaling on what's going to happen there. So that's how we at least rationalize it in our own minds while we get closer to developing a prototype and trying to get it up and running in some communities over the next few years or however.
This reminds me of Ithaca dollars for barter.
Yeah, that sounds like a community, like a local exchange currency. This is like a local exchange currency iteration 2.
I like it, and I think it's certainly is a copyable, right, cut and paste kind of thing. You can put it wherever you are or want to be, and just figure out the design of it.
Well, that's another point that we hit on a lot on Axis of Easy, is the struggle that we think the defining struggle of our age is not a left versus right or a conservative versus liberal. In this tension between network states and nation states, we think it's protocols versus platforms. Okay. Facebook is a platform. It's a closed box. You don't really know what's going to come out of the box because you can't see inside the box. Whereas email is a protocol. It's an open source protocol defined by a open series of standards, and anybody can read the code, and anybody can program their own mail servers using their own code, whether that's open source or not. But as long as the mail servers behave according to this open formalized standard, then you can connect whatever you want to the internet and start sending email back and forth to each other. And so we think a beneficial network state configuration would be one that's based on protocols. So when we think about things like Charles's CLIME system, we're not trying to design a platform like the next social media platform to disrupt Facebook. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to create a protocol design that will let anybody say, we're going to go with this model, and we might use a completely different set of tools to get onto this model, but the model is going to conform to whatever open standards and protocols there are, and they may change over time, and then they'll be able to operate within their own community and then interact with each other across communities as well.
I like that. I like that a lot. And it's like this interesting premise is protocol versus platform. It's like the platform lends itself well toward monopolistic behavior, which is probably
Yes.
why we see it. And I see it as it's really the people versus the vested interests who wish to maintain their monopoly positions and occupy the high grounds at every opportunity and deny any ground to any competitor potential. And it's like nothing new under the sun. Rook the people is the name of the game, and it has been for centuries. And so it's like,
yeah, I mean, that's
good luck with it, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's my personal view on the whole narrative around the Great Reset and the new normal is, to me, and I've said this on the show a couple of times, it just feels like, I don't believe this is a conspiracy. I don't believe there's a bunch of people sitting around the table in a back room with cigar smoke. I subscribe more to Charlie Munger's famous axiom. He's Warren Buffett's investment partner, and he said, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcomes. So if the system is structured to create inequality, wealth inequality, power inequality, then the programs that originate within that structure and seek to perpetuate it will just keep that structure in place. So yeah, it's not a conspiracy as much as it is an outcome. And so the whole new normal, build back better, all of that stuff to me feels like these are people who understand we're transitioning from what we call nation state to network states. And so they want to try and control that transition so that they still get to be the ones in charge before and after. And that happens very rarely in history. Usually when there's a complete change in the configuration of power, there's a change in leadership and a change in the relationship of these various different factions to each other. And, I think it may feel like almost Orwellian or totalitarian for a while, and a while can be a long time. It can be in the generation or 2 generations, but I think in the long run, it will just be a relatively short-lived phenomenon, and then this whatever comes next asserts itself. And it's not going to be a magic cure-all. It's not going to be a silver bullet. It's just going to be different. But I think there's potential there to really make it a lot more level playing field.
There is a potential for that, and I say that the vested interests will struggle hard to prevent that from occurring. There's a great book by Carol Quigley, the professor of the Georgetown University, 1960 book called The Evolution of Civilizations, which I find to be prescient in regards to the forces at work in civilizational dynamics.
I never knew about that book. I mean, I knew Hope and Tragedy and an Anglo-American Establishment, but I did not know about this one. So I made a note. And
1960, great book, and it's like I use it as a reference point because he calls it historical analysis, and it is he analyzes the arc of civilizational history across thousands of years and discusses how it works, and we're at the end stages of this, what he would call an age of conflict at the moment. And it's like we're in an age of conflict, and there's a monopoly system in place, which is the previous growth engine of the society, which has been monopolized and is now institutionalized. He would call that monopoly capitalism. And the forces of reaction are seeking to prevent a circumvention of the monopoly, which might allow the growth to resume if we are able. And he says that's a random event. And what you're talking about is, with this, we're going to circumvent them by creating the new thing that's, because of this opportunity that's presenting itself. It's like can't really prevent it very easily, but they're working their devil off to try to. Mm-hmm. The other way is to reform the institution of monopoly capitalism, which has been largely circumvented by the creation of institutions of imperial warfare, irrationality, and I can do it. The third institution, irrationality, and institutions of class oppression. And it's like, so that kind of prevents the revision of the monopoly capitalism to something more useful, because it's like, well, they don't want that to happen. So they set up align the interests of these groups in such a way as it prevents the public from being able to adequately get back to where we can start doing something again. So I recommend that book highly.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I'll order it after the show.
I'm gonna make a little tutorial to save people the 400 page read, because everybody's busy. It's like we keep on getting more technology and get busier, don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's an excellent thing that we're in we're certainly in a transition, and it's like the only other way out of the conflict age that we're in is what he calls the when we get a monopolistic political kind of consensus, and he calls it the golden age. It will be viewed as, because it's like we are all living under global socialism and in a degenerative sense, and it's relatively stable and relatively prosperous, and that's the way it goes, right? And it's like, so that's those are the three options according to Professor Quigley, and it's like, well. Well, we're in a weird pickle, because we are living through it where we boots on the ground trying to make it work and throw our shoulders into the thing to make it turn in a way that seems ethical to us. And it's like tough.
Well, yeah, that's why I mean, when the internet came along in the early 90s, well, of course it was around before the early 90s, but when it became more accessible to people outside the military industrial complex, it seemed very encouraging. And I was right there in the early 90s getting involved in the business and going along and building a company and that sort of thing. And since then, I mean, there has been this disenfranchisement setting in, because you see how this thing, it's still very powerful. It's still, I think, the best tool we have going, but it's trying. I hate using the phrase "they" in that generic sense, but there's this great co-opting of it, and it feels like, you know, that tendency towards monopoly. But then when cryptocurrencies came along, I'd seen a lot of technologies come and go since the early 90s and the internet come along, but nothing excited me as much as the internet until cryptocurrency came along. And now crypto, I mean, you see the same sort of thrusts toward co-option, which is to be expected, but Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of these other ones like Monero and Dash and Zcash, I don't want to leave anyone out, sorry, but they've really done a better job of resisting these trends towards co-option. So they just took the whole decentralization idea of the internet and took it up a level. And that really gives me hope amid these really interesting times that we live in. And I think with those tools, I think the tendency is irreversible now, this tendency towards decentralization. And if only because the centralized powers or the centralized nexus of power are so over leveraged and what's the word I'm looking for? They're sort of crumbling under their own weight, and they're becoming more untenable by the day with the debt loads, and I guess it's mainly the debt loads and the monetary crisis and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the way I look at it is, and I've been studying the money since about 2002. When I became interested, and it's like, whoa, this is really mad. I got so mad I was going to sue my college because they didn't teach me what a dollar actually was, and it's like, like you guys, they look. I paid them money. I did what they said. I got grades, and my theory was they were going to make me minimally qualified to enter civil society, and I don't understand a dollar means I can't sign a contract because I don't know what's going on, and absolute failure of the educational process. So I studied the money, and it's like, it looks to me like a bankruptcy, which is to say that we have all these interests that are aligned, and everybody's expecting to get paid a lot of things to do things that are not quite right, and they do them anyway because they're getting paid a lot of money or promised a good retirement or whatever. And so all the interests are lined up in such a way, but they need to be fed money. and otherwise the system is bankrupt. And I think the public in general, which is why we have the populism, is recognizing the general bankruptcy of the system. And they go, the institutions are failing, will fail to meet the promises that have been made. The checks are written and are in the mail and will not be paid in full.
Yeah.
And so reorganization is what's occurring. And it's like, so instead of having a sudden collapse, we're having this sort of piecemeal kind of slow, like snow falling kind of collapse.
Yeah, there's a fellow Canadian that I've met a couple of times, and I think I was on his show, named Jeff Berwick, who's the dollar vigilante. I mean, his new book is called Controlled Demolition. But when you mentioned bankruptcy, it brought to mind the famous Ernest Hemingway line from, I think, The Sun Also Rises, which was, how did you go bankrupt? Two ways, gradually, then suddenly. So I started studying money around the same time you did, like after the dot-com bubble blew up. I wanted to understand why the bubble blew up, and to do that, I had to start doing a deep dive into the stock market. To do that, I had to do a deep dive into company fundamentals, and I ended up kept backing up a step until I got to money, and I was reading like Ferdinand Lipp's Gold Wars and a really obscure writer who is very underrated named Vincent Locascio on the role of central bankers and inelastic currencies and traditional old gold standards. And so all of that was an education, but all the way along the line, especially when they're holding interest rates down artificially and just expanding the money supply, I was always thinking in the back of my mind, we're in this gradually, like someday this is all going to come to an inevitable conclusion. And there's another famous line I love by Douglas Casey, which is, just because something is inevitable doesn't make it imminent. Like, I always kept that in my mind, but it feels different now. And I think it started with sort of the wrong guy winning the election in 2016, and the rabble picking the wrong option in Brexit in 2016, and then COVID hit. Now it feels like we've crossed from gradually into suddenly, and that which was inevitable is now imminent. So we're kind of here. We're kicking the can down the road for decades, almost a century if you really want to go all the way back to 1913, but we finally run out of runway. Like, the wall's right in front of us, and if we kick the can now, it's going to bounce off it and hit us in the head.
So here's how this pans out. Like, I spent probably 4 years, ending about a year ago, studying what happened to America, and it's conspiratorial in its function. And it's like, okay, and it starts about 1885 with the ascension of Baron Rothschild. Ethan Rothschild. Okay. Is my marker for the beginning of monopoly capitalism in Western civilization. Professor Quigley calls it 1931, but that's, it's splitting a hair as we go, but it's the same time frame. And the study of the it certainly is conspiratorial behavior of many British lords to institute conflict throughout Western civilization with World War I and World War II, and progressing to this moment. And it's like, with the idea of institutional change being the goal, which is, it's stunning. And my father's a history professor, and this is the second time I've told this story today, so God forgive me for doing it one more time. But I told my dad, I've been studying this stuff, and I had to give myself permission. I've always been interested in history, but I had to give myself permission to study the things that I knew were forbidden in the academy, which my dad would be the gatekeeper to keep guys like me out. Okay, so I said, I gotta ask you this, Dad. I said, it occurs to me that if you think what I'm talking about is a conspiracy or a conspiracy theory, it does not matter how much evidence I bring to bear, does it? And to my great surprise, I was put on my heels with it. He agreed to that premise, which is the evidence doesn't matter. If I think it's a conspiracy, we're not paying attention because it's one of these right here. And so it doesn't matter. Ultimately, I don't think it matters if it's unconscious flow of interests, or an intentional flow of interest, it works the same. And so the issue is how do we extricate ourselves from the flow of interest in a direction that is detrimental to our own self-interest as individuals inside a wider society. And I point to this cancel culture thing, which is is Soviet in its nature, okay? It's just absolutely antithetical to Western civilization and unacceptable and by no means acceptable. So we won't do it. We'll figure out ways to avoid that, and it's okay. And it's like we will spend a lot of effort to prevent that from happening because we're not going to be corralled up like that. At least that's the hope, right?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things on that. I try not to look at things conspiratorially, and I recognize that that's a choice. And in fact, whatever you believe is a choice. Like whatever you believe,
Right.
all beliefs are an act of faith at the end of the day. So, but you're right that it doesn't matter if it's a conspiracy or not. If it's like, I look at it as really the basic architecture of the system. If you're using debt for money, then you have to expand the money supply perpetually or the system collapses. So it's sort of that incentive structure that's built into the system. The other thing about it is I choose to believe it's not a conspiracy, because if it is a conspiracy, it's just going to overwhelm me and I'm going to feel hopeless. If I feel like this is just kind of these inevitable ebbs and flows of history that we kind of like get stupid for a few generations and then we wisen up for a few generations, then I feel a little more empowered in there, because then I can just be, hopefully in my own mind at least, a tiny little counter current amid the stupid phase. But then I look at things like the cancel culture and the deplatforming and the mainstream media, and it's incredible what's going on there. And then I look at, and I think it is a conspiracy. It's the Fabian Society. They win. They've achieved complete and total victory. They planned it over 100 years ago. They're playing chess and we're playing checkers, and then I have to really walk myself back from that and say, okay, calm down,
So
and just
you have to look at it as a quantum phenomenon. So Schrodinger's cat, he's in the box, and we don't care if he's alive or dead because he doesn't matter. He's both right now, and we're going to leave him that way because it won't help us to find out, because it's too much work to open the box. Okay, we're just going to leave the box and don't think about the box. Don't worry about the cat. And it goes to this. It reminds me of this. The physics talking about free will and the entangled particles at great distance.
Quantum entanglement and
faster than light information transfer. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, and it's like, don't worry about it, man. It don't you believe you have free will, act like you have free will, and do the right thing. This is what I learned this week. Goes like this. It's like in 1600 they coined a new word, conscious. Okay, to mean aware. It comes from calm and, hang on, I wrote it down. I don't ski ray or something like that. It means to know. Okay, and so 200 years prior to that, 1400, they invented the word science, which is what we know. And then 200 years prior to that, they were using the word conscience. So to know right from wrong. So there's a moral entanglement in consciousness as of 1200 AD. Forward 200 years, they invent science, which is what we know within the context of our knowledge of right and wrong. And then 200 years later, they split apart the moral aspect of consciousness away from the moral consciousness, which is conscience or conscientiousness. And it's like, this is the source of the problems as far as I can tell. And it's like, what we need to do is marry those two back together again, which is our awareness and our moral understanding of how to behave in the world, which is, we don't rook the other guy. That's just rude, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the golden rule. Treat others as you wish to be treated, and everything else is commentary, is what they say. There's something you had said there. There's a couple of basic pillars to the sort of system we're in now, or at least the zeitgeist that we're in now. We talked about one. It's using debt for money, and it it creates a whole incentive structure. And the other is, do I live by my own moral compass? Do I do what's right for me, or in a less self-serving sounding way, do I do what I think is morally right, or do I tell everybody else what I think is morally right for them? And that's kind of the thing we're in now today, is everybody's a bunch of hectoring Karens running around telling everybody else they're racist or cultural appropriating something or misogynist, or it's never ending. And the people who are doing that the loudest aren't looking in the mirror and saying, well, there's certain serious character flaws of myself, because we all have them, that could take a lifetime to work on. And I think that's one of the things that's changed over time, is just this idea that it's okay to make moral and ethical decisions on behalf of everybody else.
I like that. It's a I absolutely agree with that, and it resonates perfectly well with me, which is to say that there's essentially two classes of people, which is the world is, we agree, we start from the same premise, the world is messed up. And then it's like, on the one hand, it's like, I need to get a hammer and straighten those people out. They're really messing things up. Or I really need to fix myself to make this world begin to nucleate in a better way. And I look at that as the intentionality, the entanglement of intentionality within the quantum framework of this universe we live in, and manifest that which establishes the moral order that you wish to inhabit.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crux of be the change you wish to see in the world. And in practical terms, there's nothing else you can do about it anyway. So there's no point. The other thing about it, oh, I lost my train of thought on it. It was, if it comes back, I'll jump in.
It'll come right back.
Yeah.
Come right back, because it's a fascinating function, which is like, you do this double slit experiment with the photons, and how you design the experiment changes the action of the photon.
Right.
It's like
yeah.
the photon had to know before you started the experiment. It's like this quantum entanglement again. So it's like the we don't understand. We like to think we understand the world with three dimensions and Newtonian physics, and then we get the Einsteinian relativity, and it's like it's not quite what we think it is. It's different, and I think intentionality is huge. How we manifest that, and it has a quantum effect in my estimation, which is, what does that mean?
You just brought me back to that point, and you added another one that I want to come back to. Like that, you led into two things. So one is, you said there's two kinds of people, right? And I said there's the kind of people who want to make moral decisions for themselves, and then there's the kind of people who want to make moral decisions for everybody else. The other two kinds of people, or another type of two kinds of people, are the ones who realize they don't know anything, and the ones who think they know everything. And so what I've been doing, especially since the lockdown started, I've always been interested in finance and economics and business, but I really started doing a deep dive into investing, like the super investors and the value investors and those. And there's this common theme that I find in the greats, is they say, I don't know. Like I saw an interview with Howard Marks, and he said there's two kinds of schools. There's the I know school, and there's the I don't know school. And I'm in the I don't know school. And I realize that's the school to be in, the I don't know, because we really don't. I found this one book by a guy named Christopher Myers called How Do We Know? And he introduced the topic of general semantics. How do we know what we think we know? And it was such a crash course in reality and I printed up one of the figures that he put in the book, and I framed it, and I can't show it to you, it's over there on the wall, but it's like, these are all the dots, call each dot a fact in reality, and then it's just all these different patterns of how you can connect it. It's like, these are all the different ways you can connect the same facts of reality. The other thing, the last thing, well, not the last, but however long you want to talk, what you're talking about, this quantum entanglement and intention and all of that, I mean, it gets distilled down into this cartoonish stuff like law of attraction and stuff like that, which I believe is, I say the law of attraction is distilled down to your biases affect your outcomes. But you're talking about at a deeper level, at the quantum level. I've been reading a lot of that. I have for a long time, and I'm completely there with you. You have to at some point decide if you think that mind and consciousness comes out of the brain, or if it's some sort of underlying substrate of reality that
Right.
we tap into.
Right.
And and that, so this, the holy grail of scientism is that consciousness comes out of the brain like heat off of a toaster, and
Right.
we'll be able to create artificial intelligence if we can just get a processor that does enough parallel computations at a dense enough rate. Then out of that, a mind is going to leap. And I don't really believe any of that to be true. I don't think artificial intelligence is a thing. I don't think the way we regard consciousness and mind, it will ever be a thing. I call artificial intelligence, I call AI algorithmic imitation. That's what it is, right? So you can maybe come up with an algo that can beat the world's greatest chess player, or can beat the world's greatest Go player, or convince you through a blind screen that you're talking to your brother, but it's not really your brother. But that doesn't mean that any of those algos are self-aware and know what they're doing. They
Right.
have no apprehension of it. And so I think that um, the mind, the consciousness is it's an ineffable quality that's just
Right.
part of the plumbing. And that's where you get into that whole quantum reality and quantum mechanics and entanglement and intention and all of that.
Right.
And little do we know about it.
Right. And it's like there's event horizons, okay, in the construction of matter, which is like we have this material substrate which has an event horizon that we don't see consciousness in. We have animals or biota come out of that, which have another layer, pre-consciousness, that has an event horizon we don't see consciousness in. And then we have this event horizon that we do see consciousness in. We call them animals, and even the plants to some extent. And there's an event horizon that comes out of that. This is a construction by Greg Enriquez out of JMU in Virginia. Then we have this social awareness, which is human cultural creation. And out of that comes a digital, which is this whatever we're interacting through now. And it's like my construction goes like this: it's like that it's not consciousness, but conscientiousness. Because it's like this: the conscientiousness is you do the right thing, you know the right thing, and do the right thing, or don't do the right thing. And a human being has apparent choice, but it's like the rock does the right thing. Like, do I roll down the hill, or do I stay on the hill, or do I slide? Right? And it's like there's basic rock choices, that, or do I just sit here and catch some more rain? Right? And so I call it conscientiousness. I quit calling it consciousness because I think it has there's like a proper order. There is a proper order to the construction of all this that we enjoy as our universe, and it's our job to try to balance with it in a harmonious nature. Then we don't need force to make us do the right thing because we're doing the right thing and it's okay. So what does that mean? Well, it's a age of conflict, as Professor Quigley would say. So it's like it's not an easy one. It's not easy because everybody thinks they know what's right and they're willing to knock heads a little bit or a lot.
Yeah, that's why I think, especially in a world as complex as ours, the only thing you can really do is figure out what is ethically acceptable to you and you alone. I mean, yeah, you're going to look out for the people you love and the people you care about and the people who rely on you. But at the end of the day, you can't. I've always said all disagreements are a difference in priorities, right?
Yep.
If you and I disagree about something, it means you're prioritizing something in a different way than I'm prioritizing something. And when you look at it that way, you have to ask a serious question. How can anybody in their right mind think that they have the right or the ability to organize somebody else's priorities?
That's
Like, it's hard enough to get your own make your own way through the day. Now you're going to suddenly tell you over there, you should be prioritizing this, and you over there, you've got too much. It's crazy. It's the height of grandiosity to even think that you're competent to do it.
It's a funny thing because it is. It's like when it's your priority is to fix everybody else's priorities, right?
Yeah.
Too much time on your hands, man. There's too much messed up people around here. It's like if you can get you straight, then you got to start, right?
Yeah.
That's
because that's a lifelong project right there.
It's amazing, and it's like, but I think it takes you 45 years to begin to understand that.
I know.
That's my theory, and I'm just now letting it dawn on me. It's like, wow, what a bright light. But what a wonderful chore it is. It's like a great big old fixer-upper, right?
Yeah. I've got a daughter. She's great. She's 15, but she's pretty firmly in the I know everything phase. And I just remember back to when I was that age, just that certitude.
Right.
It's like, my parents are idiots. Jesus Christ, don't they see how the world works? Right. But then you kind of get out there in the world, and you get your teeth kicked in a few times, and it's like, okay,
yeah, buddy.
Okay, maybe I didn't know all there was to know about the world when I was 16.
Right. It's like this. So the parents' job is to put bumpers on all the sharp edges in the room, right? Just make sure that you're not going to do too much damage by smashing about, because I'm pretty confident you're going to be wrecking a little bit.
Yeah.
But like, I ran into two people, and they got in the car accident with the 16-year-old new driver, and it's like the new driver is still learning how to drive and clearly doesn't, because bing and boom. And
yeah.
Like, okay, everybody just look, all this stuff is dangerous. This technology is very powerful, and the texting and driving thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's not really what happened, but it's like something like that, right? It doesn't matter what distracting thing there was. It's just life is full of shiny objects to distract.
Yes.
And some of them intentionally so, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. Like, what a challenge. It's a great challenge. I was always asked guys, so you're roughly my age, I suppose, and it's like, what do you tell the youth, right? And it's they already know everything, and they know that you're not the smartest bulb on the tree because you already figured it out, and you let them know foolishly, right? And or they would have figured it out by themselves anyway, right? And it's just okay, because it's like, well, at some point you got to let them be themselves and run around and scrape their knees and do whatever they're going to do, and you just be there to help them get it straight again when they're ready to listen to you better, I suppose.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, if the one thing I just try to instill in her is that the most important skill is to learn how to learn, and you're never going to be finished learning. And
that you can learn from anyone or anything, really. If you allow your mind to slow down enough and let it percolate in, there's a message there. I studied the Jungian psychology with a great group out of Edinburgh for a year. And it's like this, it's a very interesting thing. And it looks like it's all signal transduction. It's like there's signals coming in. So I started doing CrossFit about a year ago as well. And it's like this, it's like, you know what? You do these crazy Olympic lifts and stuff, and it's like you feel sore. And I do it faster than I can recuperate. So like yesterday I was doing something, I'm like, and I'm going to do it again tomorrow before I'm fully feeling yesterday. And it's like, I quit taking ibuprofen and Tylenol because I'm like this. You're sore, and that's information coming from the body talking to your brain, trying to help you get this straight, because it's confusing and difficult, but it's providing valuable information. Don't interfere with the signal transduction pathways, right? It's the same with the financial stuff. It's like, okay, you learn more when you get thrashed than when you win.
Right. And economies tend to do better when you let them run under their own steam as well, than keep trying to like micromanage them and say, oh, look, we can't let this recession happen, or we can't let interest rates find their normal clearing level and stuff like that. We were on a family trip across the States a couple years ago, and we were in Arizona. And the guy, we hired a guy to take us around the Grand Canyon and stuff. It was a great trip. And he was talking about it blew my mind, but he was talking about these certain trees there their root systems connect to each other underneath the ground. And what'll happen is one of them will get a little lightning strike. It will follow the trees down. It will go through the root system and burn out the underbrush. And that's how they sort of keep themselves like regenerating. But he said, then okay, government agency got created back in whatever 1920 or something like that, or 1950, and they came in and they said, okay, this is all wrong. Okay, we got to like manage this little brush fire, and they came in and they did this and this and this and this and this, so there was no more of these little brush fires, and like 20 years later, the whole forest burned down or something. It was just, and I told him, I said, that's exactly what it's like with the economy. And it blew his mind. He said, oh, I never even thought of it that way. That, if you just let the economy go and things get a little overheated, and then there's a recession, and the weak businesses go under and people lose their jobs, and then everyone's sort of like, well, where did I go wrong there? Or how was I not prepared? Maybe I should have more money in the bank. Maybe I should have a pantry. All those sort of things. No one makes those decisions. Nobody learns those lessons. Now it's just you're getting paycheck protection straight from the government, and businesses that should have gone bankrupt 3 crises ago are still going, and they're worth billions because they're getting GameStop or Wall Street bets. And so it's all leading towards that gigantic forest fire where there's no shock absorbers left in the system.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it is. It's frightening, isn't it?
It is. I mean, 2008, we should have just, David Stockman wrote the book, The Great Deformation, and I think he makes a great case in there that he says the world would have been fine. We would have had about an 18-month to 2-year depression after 2008, and we'd be back stronger than ever and better, more resilient shape than ever before. But now, because of the policy track we took, we're in a whole lot of trouble. And the thing is, 2008, had we handled it correctly, we wouldn't have had another financial bubble for 100 years. It would have been like, we're not doing that again. We've learned our lesson, but nobody's learned anything other than the Fed's going to keep printing money no matter what happens.
It just makes the crash look different.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, so I've been like about 2006, I got done with my residency, and I had been talking with one of the residents, and we decided to purchase a business. I'm here in Arizona as well. And,
yeah.
And it's like this, it's like, well, we've been kind of preparing for kind of this. And it's like, yeah, here it is, but it's like this comes in a different form than you expected. It's just it's always some kind of, it's like a nebulous thing. It's like a horror show, it's like it's the different monster appearing out of the hat. And that's
I was expecting 2008 early. Some people might even call me a perma bear, although I'm not really expecting a crash anymore. I'm expecting a blow off top, but like not a blow up top crash. Like hyperinflationary blowout is what I'm now expecting. But at the time, 2008, I had been kind of smelling it coming for a couple of years. And when it hit, it still surprised me. It made my head spin. It was still,
shocking.
What?
It was shocking. No, I knew it was coming because it's like this. I was like watching you like see CNN, right? We sit in the residency room and we're like sitting in the ready room and you're watching CNN's playing. It's like, and it's one more show about guys flipping houses, right? And
yeah.
Then I'm like this. I'm like, I could do that. And then I'm like, yeah, that's got to be the end of that. It's 2006 because as soon as I catch on, it's the end of the scarf.
This is me ringing the bell at the top.
Yeah, man, guys, everybody run. And it was like, it was about the right then, was like about the housing top, which is when I purchased my house. We came here to Arizona and both brought our families down and bought houses. And it's like, yeah, right about the top of the market, 2006. And it's like right then after, bing, it just went sideways. Like, wow, that was kind of spooky. And then it's like, everybody goes into shock a little bit. And the next decade spent kind of, here we are,
So are you in Arizona?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, wow. So that's why you kind of cracked up when I said Arizona. Yeah, I love it there. It's wonderful. Flagstaff is a great town. And It was
It's all very nice. What's amazing about the place is the amazing variety of geographic potentials that are here, relatively close together. It's just stunning. It's like, you can be in big trees out just stone desert. That's just crazy. Big elk walking around. I mean, it's
yeah.
right. It's just like, what an
It's,
interesting place. And I'm from the East Virginia originally, and it's like it's a trip to get used to here. And it's like, okay, it's far away from everybody that I call family, and which is okay. That's has its own disturbing element to it, which is But I went into private practice, and it was like that was a bad lesson, which is the kid banging their head on the wall too many times and to figure out there's a door over there. That's me. Which is like we sold out. We sold out 2 years ago, and now are employed physicians, and it's like, okay, it's quite a humble pie, but it's like it's a systematic oppression, I think, for against private practice, because the hospital runs a clinic that is a rural health clinic, federally designated, that gets paid 3.5 times what I can get paid, even if I have the same designation. It's like, okay, I see the handwriting. It says, stop hitting your head on that wall. Use the door, be polite, and you don't have to feel any more pain. It's like, okay, you just have to feel humiliated for a while, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's all right. Now I was going to ask you this, Christopher, how do we know? What's the last name on that one?
On me?
No, Christopher, you had a reference. How do we know? Christopher.
Oh, Christopher Meyer.
Meyer.
It's Meyer or Myers?
Okay.
He wrote another book called, there was a famous book on investing called 100 to 1 in the stock market, written by a guy named, I think, Lawrence Phelps. And Christopher Meyer wrote a follow-up like 20, 30 years later, a commentary on that book. And I can't remember the name of that book. And he also wrote Invest Like a Deal Maker. And that's a great book. And so I just saw that he had that other book out, and I thought, I'll check it out. It was different from anything else he'd written, but it's really good.
It's all right. The only other fellow that I like in investing is Martin Armstrong. He's quite an interesting character.
Oh yeah. I think I was on his mailing list, and I just realized now that you mention it that I haven't seen anything from him in a while. So I wonder if I kind of got filtered out or something. But he's an interesting character.
I check he blogs every day, and quite fascinating, because he's among he believes in truth. He wants to know what's really going on rather than pushing an agenda, which is he did what he did. But his website is armstrongeconomics.com.
Yeah.
If anybody's interested, and I've been watching that one since I moved here in 2006. Just fascinating, and before.
Yeah.
But it's like
I used to get the PDFs that he would send out because he was in federal prison for a while because of that. He says he got kind of jerry-rigged into it, but like railroaded in. But he kept writing away, and I remember those getting like circulated. It was like samizdat in America, right? This guy's writing these things in prison and sending them out.
Typing them on a typewriter and drawing pictures by hand. And 2011 or 12, he got out.
Yep.
And he was in for
they said it was commingling funds.
It was contempt.
It was contempt. Okay, right.
They
Yeah.
kept him in jail on contempt for 7 years.
Yes, that's right. I remember that now.
No charges. And he pled it up to the Supreme Court, and had the Supreme Court agreed to hear it. So they said, you're done. You get to go home.
Yeah.
It was like, because it was illegal, I'm pretty sure. I just was stunning abusive behavior.
It's funny though. I mean, he's got pictures of himself with Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, and it's like he's pretty high powered in his day.
He invented the yen carry trade. I mean, and for that case, the courts awarded the bank 600 million of his dollars. They just stole it from him, and it's like all gone. And it's like anybody that has $600 million in profit to steal is you got to tip your hat to that craziness. That is just out of the park.
That reminds me, not the Mark Cohodes, Alder Lane Eggs, the famous short seller, who who are some of his famous shorts? My Medics was the big one that's been culminating lately. But he talks about, if you catch one of his podcasts, how he had a short book going before the global financial crisis, and he was totally on the right side of the trade, and he was going to make a fortune for his clients. And then it was just Goldman Sachs or JPM or someone said, well, no, we're going to raise your margin requirements. We're going to do this. They just basically moved the goalposts, changed the rules of the game, and forced them out of business. And he had to unwind everything, close it down, return capital. And
Right. Right. And it's like, so, and I think that goes kind of full circle, which is this, it is has all the appearances of a marketplace and yet is not.
yes,
And
I
it's
would say so.
it's a rigged system. And it's like, okay, we won't say conspiracy because that will irritate our souls too much. We'll just leave that cat in that box. Call it good, right? And keep on moving forward, going, okay, what do we do given this uncertain situation that's has vastly irritating potentials within it, and move around it.
Well, my advice has always been own your own business, even if you have an occupation, but do something on the side, or like a micro business or something that you can scale if you have to, or if you're forced to, or if you have the good fortune to, and try and get involved in the decentralized protocols, the crypto economy, and try to avoid debt if you can. Turn off the TV and read books.
How to get that, boy. I like that.
Yeah.
Very good. That's a perfect ending. Because I like to talk to people. I talk to a lot of different people. I got these young fellows finding people, and they found you, and I appreciate that. And it's cool. Like, I find all these different people, and it's like, how did you get in this? And I'm interested because it's like, tell the story a little bit to give the kids something to think about, different, like what kind of options there are. Because it's like, we live in a tiny world when we're kids, man. It's like, we don't understand the potentials out here, which are huge. And it's like, it's good advice. Don't get in debt because that locks you in your limited potential, right? I like that. And then read books is like, find out what other people are thinking. They're thinking all over the board, and then you integrate it however you do it. I like that.
Great. Actually, there's one last thing I'll say.
Yes, sir.
About this sort of thing. And I feel okay talking about it, but if you're the type of person who's not where you want to be in your life, I mean, you strike me as like you're doing what you want to do. I've been very fortunate. I kind of do whatever I want. But if you're not there, there's this one big thing in your life that's stopping you from getting where you want to be. And you know what it is, but you're spending a lot of energy trying to avoid facing what it is. In my case, I'm comfortable talking about it. I was an alcoholic, still am, 22 years sober. I realized I'm not going to get where I want to be if I'm like chained down by this. So I don't have a moral attitude towards alcohol or anything like that. But for me, that was my rock. So I had to face that and get rid of it. And when I do mention this in public, I say my Twitter DMs are open. Stunt Pope on Twitter. If you think you have a drinking problem and you want to talk to someone, that's cool. But it could be anything, right? It could be I watch television all day long, or I have an unhealthy relationship with my spouse, whatever it is. You know what it is in the back of your mind. Figure out what that is. Fix that first. And everything else is going to follow after that. It doesn't mean you're going to have a pink cloud for the rest of your life, but it's going to sort of like catapult you into the next level so you can face all these challenges in this complex world with a straight head and get to where you want to be.
I like that. I tell people to let go of the anchor. It's okay.
Yeah.
Because you're not married to the anchor, man. It's okay. You can go to the anchor and you can get some air. It's okay.
Yeah. So that's your anchor. Find what your anchor is and cut it loose.
That's right.
Everybody's got one. Well, everyone who's not where they want to be has one. And even people who are where you want to be kind of think.
Impediments. We have our impediments. And it's okay. And it's like, keep an eye out. You'll find yours if you are not aware of it. It'll make itself known to you, right?
It's like a layer of an onion, right? You get off that first layer, and it's like, okay, now you got to get to the next level. So
that's right. Well, Mark, I appreciate you coming out and spending a minute with me. Well, maybe we'll get a chance to do this again and compare notes.
Yeah, I would love to. Maybe you can come on our show sometime and we'll talk there too. So
Wonderful.
Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful. So give them your links. They're easydns.com.
Yep.
Your
The blog is bombthrower.com and the podcast is accessofeasy.com. And I'm at Stunt Pope on Twitter if you want to hit me up there.
good. Well, we'll put those in the show notes. And like I say, thank you again. Mark Jeftovic.
Yeah, Jeftovic. Pretty good.
I was going to say Jeftovic because I think
yeah, a lot of people put the soft C on the end. It's a Yugoslavian name. I've never been there. My dad was born there, but he grew up in England. So
very good. All right. Have a wonderful week, sir.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Best Medicine Podcast with Bradley H. Werrell, DO. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe below, either over there or over there. Also, if you're interested in a medical consultation with myself, there's also information below.